In the deepest waters of America, something ancient stirs. Something that has watched civilizations rise and fall from the shadowy depths below. Tonight, we descend into the murky realm of America's lake monsters, where the line between legend and reality dissolves like morning mist over dark water. Picture this: Lake Pepin, Minnesota, April 28, 1871. The morning sun casts long shadows across the glassy surface as a lone fisherman casts his line into waters that have remained unchanged for millennia. The silence is absolute, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against his small boat. But beneath him, in the crushing darkness of the lake's depths, something massive shifts, something that shouldn't exist. The fisherman feels it first as a tremor through his boat's hull. Then the water begins to churn, and from the depths emerges a sight that will haunt him for the rest of his days. A serpentine head, larger than a horse, breaks the surface. Eyes like black mirrors regard him with an intelligence that predates human civilization. The creature's body, what little he can see of it, stretches back into the murky depths, disappearing into shadows that seem to swallow light itself. This is not just a story about monsters. This is about the primal fear that lurks in every human heart when we gaze into deep water and wonder what might be gazing back. From the frigid depths of Lake Champlain to the crystal-clear abyss of Lake Tahoe, America's lakes harbor secrets that science cannot explain and skeptics cannot dismiss. But here's what they don't tell you in the tourist brochures. These creatures aren't just random anomalies. They're connected, part of something larger, something that spans continents and cultures, something that has been with us since the first humans dared to venture onto the water. The Dakota knew, the Washoe understood, the Shillaks never forgot. Long before European explorers ever set foot on these shores, the indigenous people spoke in hushed tones of the serpents that ruled the deep places. They offered sacrifices, performed rituals, and passed down warnings that echo through the centuries. Long before Europeans set foot on these shores, the first peoples knew. They knew that certain waters were forbidden, that some depths should never be disturbed, and that the serpents dwelling in the darkness demanded respect, or else. The Dakota called it the deadly beast of the waters. Their elders would gather children around flickering fires and speak in voices barely above a whisper about the creature that ruled Lake Pepin. They told of warriors who ventured too far from shore and never returned, their canoes found empty, drifting like ghost ships on the morning tide. They spoke of offerings left at the water's edge, desperate attempts to appease something that viewed humans as nothing more than prey. But the Dakota weren't alone in their terror. Hundreds of miles west, the Washoe people of Lake Tahoe had their own nightmares. They called them water babies, but don't let the innocent name fool you. These weren't the cherubic spirits of children's tales. These were ancient entities that could drag a full-grown man to the bottom of the lake before he could even scream. The Washoe knew that certain parts of the lake were cursed, that the water itself would turn against those who showed disrespect. And far to the north, the Syilx First Nation trembled at the mention of Nahaa'itk, the lake demon of Okanagan. This wasn't just a creature to them. It was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the lake's wrath. They understood that Nahaa'itk demanded tribute, and those who failed to provide it would face consequences that extended far beyond their own lives. Listen carefully to what these diverse cultures were telling us. Separated by thousands of miles, speaking different languages, following different traditions, yet they all shared the same bone-deep terror of what lurked beneath the surface. This wasn't coincidence. This was knowledge passed down through generations of survivors, people who had learned the hard way that some waters are not meant for human intrusion. The date that changed everything was recorded in black ink on yellowing paper, preserved in the Minnesota Historical Society's archives like evidence of a crime that was never solved. April 28, 1871. The day that transformed Indigenous warnings into documented terror. The morning dawned clear and calm over Lake Pepin, the kind of perfect spring day that draws people to the water's edge. The lake stretched like a mirror between Minnesota and Wisconsin, its surface so still it seemed solid enough to walk on. But beneath that deceptive tranquility, something ancient was stirring. The witness was a local resident, a practical man not given to flights of fancy or tall tales. He had lived by the lake his entire life, knew its moods and seasons like an old friend. He understood the difference between a floating log and something alive, between the wake of a boat and the disturbance caused by something moving beneath the surface. What he saw that morning defied every rational explanation his mind could conjure. It began as a ripple, a subtle disturbance in the perfect mirror of the lake's surface. At first, he thought it might be a large fish, perhaps one of the massive sturgeon that occasionally surfaced in these waters. But as he watched, the disturbance grew larger, more purposeful. The water began to churn and bubble as if something enormous was rising from the depths. Then he saw the head. It emerged slowly, deliberately, like a nightmare taking physical form. The size alone was enough to stop his heart, larger than any creature that should exist in these waters, larger than any creature that should exist anywhere. But it was the eyes that truly terrified him. Dark, intelligent, ancient beyond measure. Eyes that seemed to recognize him, to evaluate him, to decide whether he was worth the effort of destruction. Samuel de Champlain thought he had seen everything the New World could offer. The French explorer had navigated treacherous rivers, survived harsh winters, and encountered indigenous peoples whose customs seemed alien to European eyes. He was a man of science and reason, trained to observe and document the natural world with clinical precision. But on that fateful day in 1609, as he gazed upon the pristine waters of the lake that would bear his name, Champlain encountered something that shattered his rational worldview forever. The lake stretched before him like a liquid highway between what would become Vermont and New York, its waters so clear he could see deep into the depths. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, surrounded by mountains that reflected perfectly in the still surface. To Champlain, it represented the promise of the New World, vast, untamed, full of possibilities. He had no way of knowing that he was about to become the first European to document one of America's most enduring mysteries. Champlain was meticulously recording his observations in his journal when the water began to change. At first, it was just a subtle shift in the light, a darkening that seemed to rise from the depths like a living shadow. Then the surface began to ripple, and something emerged that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. He called it a Kausaru, a sea creature unlike anything in European waters. But his clinical description, preserved in his journal for posterity, reads like something from a nightmare. Jaws 2.5 feet long and a double set of very sharp and dangerous teeth. This wasn't the fanciful account of a superstitious sailor. This was the careful observation of a trained explorer, a man whose very survival depended on accurate reporting. What do you call it when nearly 60 people see the impossible? When an entire crowd of rational modern individuals simultaneously witness something that shouldn't exist? When skepticism becomes impossible because the evidence is staring you in the face with ancient, intelligent eyes? July 1984. Lake Champlain shimmered under the summer sun as tourists and locals gathered for what should have been a peaceful day on the water. Families with children, elderly couples enjoying retirement, young adults seeking adventure. a typical cross-section of humanity drawn to the lake's legendary beauty, none of them expected to become part of the largest mass sighting in cryptozoological history. It began, as these encounters often do, with a subtle wrongness in the water, a disturbance that didn't match the gentle waves lapping against the shore, a shadow that moved independently of the clouds above, a ripple that seemed to originate from something far beneath the surface. The first person to notice was a child, her young eyes unclouded by adult skepticism. She tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing toward the center of the lake where something dark was rising from the depths. The mother's first instinct was to dismiss it as imagination, but as she followed her daughter's gaze, her blood turned to ice. Something massive was emerging from Lake Champlain's depths. One by one, the other witnesses turned to look. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children stopped playing. Even the most hardened skeptics found themselves staring in disbelief at something that challenged every assumption they held about the natural world. At 1,600 feet deep, Lake Tahoe holds more than just water. It holds secrets that have remained hidden since the last ice age, mysteries that lurk in depths so profound that sunlight has never touched the bottom. This is not just another lake, this is an alpine abyss, a liquid cathedral where something ancient has made its home. Lake Tahoe straddles the border between California and Nevada like a sapphire jewel set in granite. Its waters so clear you can see down 100 feet on a calm day. But that clarity is deceptive. Beyond the reach of human vision, in the crushing darkness of the deepest waters, something moves that shouldn't exist in any earthly lake. The 1980s brought a series of encounters that would forever change how people viewed this pristine alpine paradise. The witnesses weren't the usual suspects, not attention-seeking tourists or local storytellers looking to boost business. They were credible professionals whose reputations depended on accuracy and truth. An optician, trained to observe minute details with scientific precision, was the first to report the impossible. He was conducting a routine survey of the lake's optical properties when something massive passed beneath his research vessel. The water, crystal clear just moments before, suddenly darkened as if a living shadow had moved through it. Then he saw the outline, serpentine, enormous, moving with purpose through the depths. Every even-numbered year, in the month of June, something rises from the depths of Lake Tahoe. Not randomly, not sporadically, but with a precision that suggests intelligence far beyond what we attribute to any known creature. This is the pattern that has emerged from decades of careful documentation, a schedule so consistent it's become both a source of fascination and terror for those who study the lake's mysteries. The pattern was first noticed by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a marine biologist who spent 15 years cataloging unusual sightings around Lake Tahoe. What she discovered defied every principle of animal behavior she had studied. Random encounters with unknown species follow no discernible pattern, she noted in her research. But Tahoe Tessie's appearances are anything but random, they're scheduled. The serpents don't recognize human boundaries. Political borders, national sovereignty, the arbitrary lines we draw on maps. None of these matter to creatures that have inhabited these waters since before humans learned to make fire. And nowhere is this more evident than in the connection between America's lake monsters and their northern cousin, Ogopogo of Lake Okanagan. Cross the border into British Columbia, Canada, and you'll find yourself at the shores of Lake Okanagan, a body of water that shares more than just geographical proximity with the haunted lakes of America. Here, in the pristine waters of the Canadian wilderness, dwells a creature that the Indigenous Silex people have known for millennia as Naha'itk, the lake demon. The similarities are too numerous and too specific to be coincidental. Like its American cousins, Ogopogo is described as a massive serpentine creature with a long neck and intelligent eyes. Like Champ, Pepie, and Tessie, it has been witnessed by hundreds of credible observers over the centuries. And like all the lake monsters of North America, it seems to possess an intelligence that goes far beyond simple animal instinct. In an age of cameras and sonar, the monsters have not disappeared. If anything, they've become bolder, more deliberate in their appearances, as if they understand that modern technology poses no real threat to their ancient secrets. The digital age was supposed to solve mysteries like this, to provide definitive proof or debunking of creatures that shouldn't exist. Instead, it has only deepened the enigma. Consider the evidence that has accumulated in just the past decade. High-definition underwater cameras have captured shadows moving at impossible speeds through the depths of Lake Champlain. Sonar readings from Lake Tahoe have detected objects the size of school buses moving through areas where no known life should be able to survive. Thermal imaging from Lake Pepin has revealed heat signatures that suggest massive warm-blooded creatures in waters too cold to support such life. Yet for every piece of evidence that emerges, the creatures seem to adapt their behavior to maintain the mystery. It's as if they understand the capabilities of our technology and adjust their appearances accordingly. They surface just outside the range of cameras, move just fast enough to blur sonar readings, and disappear just before research teams can arrive with their equipment. As you stand at the edge of any deep lake, remember this: the water you're looking at is not empty. It never has been. Beneath that deceptively calm surface, in the crushing darkness of the depths, something ancient watches and waits. Something that has been here far longer than human civilization and will remain long after we're gone. We've journeyed together through the dark waters of America's most haunted lakes. We've witnessed the terror of that first documented encounter on Lake Pepin in 1871, when a simple fisherman's morning was shattered by the emergence of something that shouldn't exist. We've stood with Samuel de Champlain as he gazed into the intelligent eyes of a creature that challenged everything he thought he knew about the New World. We've shared the collective horror of 58 witnesses who saw the impossible made manifest on Lake Champlain's surface. The truth is this: we are not alone on this planet. We never have been. In the deepest places where sunlight has never penetrated and human exploration has barely scratched the surface, other forms of consciousness have evolved and thrived. These are not simple animals driven by instinct and hunger. These are intelligent beings with their own agendas, their own purposes, their own understanding of the world that predates and transcends human knowledge. The next time you stand at the edge of deep water, remember that you are not looking at an empty void. You are looking at a habitat, a home, a domain ruled by intelligence that has been watching humanity since we first learned to make fire. You are looking at the realm of creatures that have chosen to reveal themselves to us in carefully measured doses, beings that understand us far better than we understand them. And sometimes, if you're very quiet and very still, you might catch a glimpse of something moving in the depths, something that shouldn't exist, but does. Something that has been waiting in the darkness for far longer than human memory can reach. Something that knows you're there. The lake monsters of America are not just legends or folklore or the products of overactive imaginations. They are reminders that this world still holds secrets, that consciousness takes forms we've never imagined, and that in the deepest waters, ancient intelligence still stirs. So the next time you hear the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, remember, you are not alone. You never have been. And in the crushing darkness of the depths, something ancient watches and waits, patient as the stones, enduring as the water itself. The serpents in the deep are real, and they remember everything.